Welcome, welcome, welcome. Appreciate all of you coming to join today. As I mentioned earlier, my name's Linda Berberick. I run a company called Linda B Learning, where I specialize in both human learning and machine learning and where those two intersect. What we're going to be talking about today is what is learning? What do we even mean by that when we say learning? Because we use the term as if it means the same thing to everybody. And quite honestly, it doesn't. I've got a whole bookcase of books that talk about learning in completely different ways, depending on what your perspective is. Whether you are coming at it from a biomechanical perspective and you're talking about motor learning, whether you're coming at it from an educational perspective and you're talking about pedagogy or the adult version of that, or if you're talking about learning from the perspective of behavior analysis and what that means when you're designing schedules of reinforcement. And so even me just talking about those three very different examples might make your head go, what? What is she even talking about right now? But the point of this chat is to get a sense of what we think learning is. How do we experience it specifically as it applies to us on the job? So that's the first question I'm going to pose to you. And I'm dropping this in the chat, and I would encourage you to actually answer this in the chat. And I like to give us little breaks so you can see which responses apply to which question. So the first question is, what is learning and development? What do we think of when we hear those words? What does that even mean to us? So go ahead and capture your thoughts in the chat. What is learning and development? What do we mean by that? I know in some of my previous sessions, some people have thought that it refers to child development or schedules of, those kinds of things, the way that we develop as a human being going through puberty, for example. So Naomi is saying evolution and change within and outside ourselves. And maybe it's physical, psychological, emotional. Yeah, Taryn is talking about learning as acquisition of new knowledge or updated information. Okay, awesome. What else? What do the rest of you think? What do we mean by learning? It is, in fact, a very nuanced question, Sharon. Oh, I like what Cece has said there, too. With a path to development as a subject matter expertise or any level, these are great. Additional train of thought that expands awareness. Beautiful. Process of enhancing the skills, knowledge, and capabilities of individuals. Love it. Yeah, great question, Dylan. Is there a boundary between learning and development since they are often paired? Awesome. So as we can see, even within this group, we have a couple of different ideas about what we think about when we think about learning and development. And so since I usually teach this in a corporate setting to employees of specific companies, one of the things that I ask people is, what learning opportunities are available to you where you work? So I'm dropping that in the chat next. And this is going to be interesting for some of us because a lot of the folks that are on the call today are solopreneurs. What does that mean for you as someone who doesn't have like a corporate learning and development center, if that's not your case? So yes, Sharon, I agree that learning just for the sake of learning isn't necessarily the goal. The goal is that we learn something to apply it to a specific situation. Ooh, and I love what Kristen had to say here. Learning is about gaining knowledge and understanding. So second question, what learning opportunities do you have available to you where you work? Yep, so some people will attend conferences, they do things outside of their work, they go to events, finding opportunities to learn. Here's the thing too, right? Like a lot of when we think about learning, we think about it as classroom learning, but it doesn't, that's formal learning, right? So formal learning is one category of learning, but then informal learning encompasses all these other ways that we learn, such as having conversations, such as having the opportunity to do maybe a work share or something along those lines. So I do encourage people to think more broadly about what a learning opportunity actually is. Even making a mistake is a learning opportunity if you choose to reframe it that way instead of, thinking of it as, oh, I failed or something like that. Love this, love this. So a lot of our folks who are solopreneurs and entrepreneurs are still making the effort to attend outside events, whether that is through a professional organization, whether that is through their religious studies, what have you, various readings, and then learning on the job. I mean, there's nothing unusual about that. Oh, I love that, Naomi. As an educator, I feel like I understand that learning should happen at all the time, that almost every opportunity is a learning opportunity, right? If we choose to look at it that way. If we are thinking about it from the perspective of on-the-job training, one of the things that's very popular in corporate learning is the individual plan, right? The individual plan of how we're going to develop and learn. So they're called usually individual development plans. how does this apply to you then if you are a solopreneur, or if you aren't a solopreneur, if you do work with a company? Have you created for yourself an individual development plan, either for yourself or with your manager, if that applies to your situation? Do you actively, formally do that in your life? Love these. Learning by mistakes. Yes, absolutely, Kadar. I do wonder about this idea of the individual development plan. That is a very popular formal structure in a lot of corporate learning and development departments in large corporations. Is that a natural thing to do? Oh, love that, Dylan. The importance of the social aspect of learning and an individual learning plan run against that idea. Very possibly, right? Because for me, having that kind of structured approach suggests that it is formal in nature. And that's what learning is this formal learning, whereas causes us to potentially overlook the opportunity to have more informal learning experience. Yeah, and so that's really interesting too, Kristen, that current manager lacks the capacity and knowledge to guide me. That's the challenge, right? So and that's kind of where I'm going a little bit with this thread of learning and whose responsibility is for you to gain your learning experiences. So we talked about, have you created an individual development plan with your manager? Or in your case, does that actually run against your philosophies of learning? The next question I have for you, what is your role in your own career development, if that's why we're, participating in these learning experiences in the first place? Is it your responsibility? Is it your manager's responsibility? To Kristen's point earlier, maybe your manager isn't in a position to be able to guide you because they aren't in a place where their own skill set actually can help you. So that's my fourth question to you. What is your role? What's your manager's role? Who is responsible for you developing your own career? Yes, I am my own manager. So up to me to learn on the job. Yeah, that's what we were talking about with solopreneurs. But in Holly's particular case, because she's a client of mine and we work together directly, I can attest to the fact that she's learning a lot about learning and development, how to write learning objectives, how to do item analysis, because she is working for her own company, taking the lead before she hires a greater team. So yes, very direct experience. Holly B learning, as we were talking about yesterday. Yes, love that. Is it the manager's responsibility maybe to give you space and opportunity to learn, and then it's your responsibility to actually maximize those opportunities. Love that. Ooh, adding arrows to my quiver. And the self-motivated, the whole idea of being a lifelong learner, a lot of people talk about it. What does that actually mean? We're seeing lots of examples in the chat of what that actually means. Being a lifelong learner is looking for those opportunities, seeing opportunities maybe where other people don't see them, that in fact, this is a learning opportunity. What am I missing here? So yeah, so I do love the conversation around whose responsibility is it for you to develop in your own career and to find access to learning opportunities that are related to career development. Yeah, excellent point. So another example of an informal learning experience is meetup groups, right? So yeah, Python as a skill set when you're learning to code, there's so many resources, right? And taking a formal class is generally not the way a lot of people learn how to code. Some people might start there, but once you get into actually coding, you're really doing a lot more exploratory learning. You're working with peers to learn. So all of these opportunities to do peer learning is highly underrated. And in fact, it's the way that a lot of us do, in fact, learn, even from childhood on. Yeah, it's one of my favorites too, Em. I was always that kid in elementary school that would get their work done first. And, rather than get in trouble, the teacher would redirect you to help kids maybe who had a little more struggle. Yeah, and then doing research, right? Actually working with the tech, doing training courses. There's lots and lots of different opportunities. Love this. Yeah, that's the challenge with peer learning too, is that a lot of us who've had experience with being put into groups to learn in groups that we didn't get the choice to choose, that sometimes works out in a less than favorable way. There's generally someone who will take on more of the responsibility for the group than others, and that can be challenging. But yeah, actually creating peer-to-peer learning, I've done a lot of that for tech companies where I've actually gone in and taught formal structures of how technical people can become better peer teachers and peer learners. There is a whole methodology around that. I've done that at Google. I've done that at Microsoft. I've done that at Oracle. I've done that at Visa. Most of the places I've worked, I've done that particular. That might be my next chat next in 2025. I might do another session like this around what is peer learning and what are some of the proven practices around peer learning. So awesome. So we've been talking about career learning and your responsibility as the person learning and your manager's responsibilities. So here's the other thing I want you to kind of consider before we leave the topic of career advancement and learning related to that. So where you are right now in the role that you're in right now, whether that's working for yourself or working with a team or working for a company, here's another question that I'd like to pose for you. What are the types of learning opportunities you would need to advance in your career? So let's consider that question. What type of learning opportunities would you need? And especially for those of us who run our own companies, that might be, oh, what do I need to know? Well, when you run your own company, you basically have to know everything, right? You have to know how to manage your books, how to, you have to figure out what are you going to take on for yourself versus what you're going to delegate. But if you are working for within a company, do you know what's available to you? Do you know what kind of things will actually help you advance? If that is the purpose of your learning. And I'm teasing where we're going with this. Yeah, good point. So where we are right now, Dylan, with this whole idea of there's so many options available, it's kind of like this, I refer to that as the spray and pray approach. We're just going to give you everything, this entire buffet. Choose what you need. But to the point of, is this actually going to be helpful for advancing me in my career? I actually worked with a lot of systems when I was at Oracle and at Blackbaud and a couple of the places that I've worked where we actually build systems that allow you to see the lattice of where your career can go, not just the ladder of where your career can go, and then associate learning experiences that on a talent marketplace you can actually bid for and actually move towards and see where the specific holes are for the career you want or where you want to get to versus where you are today. So technology can be used for that. But right now, we're not necessarily doing that, right? So we have all of this AI available to us that allows us to tinder things up, if you will, to connect things. But somehow we still end up with a deluge, and we still end up with, I don't know what's going to be the most helpful for myself. Ooh, Sharon, love that. I need to learn to understand the key business roles, even if I don't plan to do them all myself. Yeah. And yes, the overwhelm is real. Absolutely, Cece. So having that path to see the outcome, super important. Yeah. And technology, like I said, I mean, talent marketplaces, there was a brilliant one that I used to really love and advocate to everybody that was called Hitch. It was actually based here in Seattle. They were acquired by ServiceNow, so that functionality belongs to them. But there's lots of other talent marketplace technologies that literally do exactly that. They're brought into companies to help you determine what your career paths should be, where you are, where you want to go, where your managers and other important people in your career life want you to go, as well as, what are the different ways to get there? What are some work options to get there? Some maybe short-term assignments, formal courses, informal courses, etc. Technology can help us by tendering up appropriate learning opportunities based on where we want to advance. And wouldn't it be wonderful if that was just available as a public service? So if you had a GPT that could help you design your career path that was actually accurate and helpful and did help you align and track your progress around the way. Can we build those things? Absolutely. Are we building those things? Not outside of individual companies. Excellent. I love where the conversation is going in the chat too. This is brilliant, brilliant. Yeah, and we can't downplay the importance of coaching and mentoring. I mean, that's informal learning, but it's very important for informal learning as well. And a lot of times just those conversations that you might have with a coach or a mentor can send you down your own, as Sharon is saying, path of self-study. And finding those people, I'm actually working with a new client right now who that is what their technology does. It's a networking app that allows you to connect with people to mentor. So people who want to be mentored versus people who want to mentor others. It's actually pretty cool. They just launched in September, and I'm super excited about where that one's going. I'm going to pivot us slightly now as we're getting into our final minutes of the conversation. So I've been talking a lot, sort of directing the conversation around career development. So now I'd like you to consider, besides career advancement, what are other reasons for learning something? So dropping that in the chat now. Personal growth, for sure. Yep, challenging yourself. Mental health, love that. To grow, to change, take better care of people we care about because it's boring not to be learning. Personal development, awesome. I love that. I love that. So Sharon is talking about how she doesn't learn primarily for career development, that she actually learns mostly for herself, right? Because she loves to learn new things, live an emergency-free life. Yeah, because you're being proactive when you're learning things, right? You don't know necessarily where it's going to come to bear. But I've often found that too. I've had a very, even in my formal education, a very eclectic kind of formal education. So people like, how did you get from theater to genetics to behavioral psychology? Like, how does that all go together? It all goes together. Always going down the rabbit hole. You never know where it's going to come to bear. That is absolutely the case. So I have one final question for you today as well. Absolutely. Everything is connected. To be less ignorant, that's actually, before I go to that next question, I want to touch on that a little bit too, Kristen, because learning about other people's perspectives, right? Like that's how we actually get to a more equal, a more fair society, is by understanding that our perspective is not the universal perspective, that there's value in being able to understand where someone else is coming from, even when you don't agree with them. If your whole point of talking to someone is just to push your own point, you're not learning. I am a person who often says you learn more by listening than you do by talking, because when you're talking, you're just repeating what you already know. When you're listening, there's an opportunity to learn something new. Absolutely, Sharon. More listening, less talking. Leveling each other up. Exactly, Cece. Asking questions, then truly listening for the answer as opposed to listening to respond, right? We all know what that sounds like, what that looks like. And a lot of time, I mean, we see that a lot on social media, don't we? Where people are just saying the thing and then another person says another thing completely unrelated, or maybe just to disparage the other person, but not really useful in terms of learning new information. So one last question for you today to wrap this up, because I want to know, because I am a curious person, what are some of the things that you want to learn? How long have we got? Love that, Sharon. Oh gosh, I love that knowing how to accept the limitations of loved ones, how to still love them and be in relationships with them. Bot creation. Okay, cool. Learn another language, coding, how to be less self-deprecating and critical of others. I want to learn my double toe loop. I know that sounds kind of silly, but I have not yet mastered that. Oh, Kadar, how to be more social. Here you are being more social. Always how to be a better human. Oh, good job. Love that. Yes, how to not take things personally. Yeah, that's very, very valuable. I love that we've got the focus here a little bit on the psychosocial aspects of things and not just the hard skills, right? Like we often hear about, oh, we need to learn the hard skills, when it's really the psychosocial skills that are generally the challenging ones for a lot of us, even those of us who are very self-aware. And I think too, the learning of what is it we want to learn, and our whys. Our whys are actually hugely important too. As we're coming to the end of the session, I want to thank you for joining today. Hopefully this has inspired you to think a little bit more deeply about learning, that learning isn't just the standard formal thing that you get out of taking a course, that almost any opportunity in life, almost any experience in life can be an opportunity to learn things. There are definitely what I call proven practices around how to develop better learning experiences. And if that's of interest to you, that's what I do, right? So although I do a lot of work around automation and machine learning, ultimately, it comes down to human learning and how humans learn in community with other humans, self-paced, in community with machines, which seems weird, but that's where we are in the world right now. We all be learning. And so that's why, my company name is a play on my own last name, but it's also because we always be learning. With that, I'm going to end our session today. I'm going to thank you for coming and for interacting. Hopefully you made some great connections. You've met some people, and go out there and learn something new today. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for coming.